Kia ora koutou. I'm Rachel. Welcome to my channel. It might be a little bit awkward because I'm new here, but I'm really keen to talk about well-being and activism. I'm keen to see thriving communities where people can do the meaningful work and live fulfilling lives. So let's have some conversations. I thought a good place to begin would be advice for new activists. Now, I'm no kind of master on well-being and activism. This is really just my reflections and what I'll be telling myself going forward as I try to keep well-being at the focus and centre of my own activism. So yeah, please join me. I'm going to do this over a few parts because once I started thinking about this, I just had this flood of ideas. Like I say, this is just where I'm coming from. Take what resonates with you and leave the rest. I'd love to hear in the comments if this connects to what you're feeling in activist scenes that you're in, or if it's, you've experienced something quite different. I'll be drawing on my experience in volunteer organising in mostly the anarchist scene, and also paid work in sexual violence prevention. So, my first piece of advice. Just know that you're enough. You are enough. The fact that you give a shit, that you care enough to give your time to show up and be part of whatever movement you're in, you're enough. And it has to be that way. If we're going to see meaningful change in the world, every part of our community has to be seen as enough, right? And I think it's also just true. So please know that you're enough. The reason it sounds kind of corny, but just let it in, right? The reason why it can feel hard sometimes to feel like we're enough is because when you are new to an activist scene and you come in, you're surrounded by all these experienced activists who might have a lot of skills and knowledge and language that you don't have yet, as well as they've taken on a lot of lifestyle features that you might not have taken on. That can feel quite intimidating, and it can also lead to people really being in a hurry to try to take on all of this stuff very quickly. So some of the stuff that I'm thinking of, and there'll be so many that I've forgotten, so please, again in the comments, if you've got thoughts, please share what I've forgotten. But some of the things you might be trying to take on lifestyle-wise are things like becoming vegan, going zero waste. You might be experimenting with polyamory. You might be doing some kind of housing experiment where you're buying land together or a house together or something. And so things that are right in our personal lives, right? And it takes time to work all that stuff out. And that's extra work that you're doing on top of the campaign or whatever that you've joined. And any other commitments that you have in your life, work commitments, family commitments, etc. So that's all hard work, and it can be overwhelming, and it can, like I say, always lead to this, not necessarily, but it can often lead to this experience of not being enough and being in a hurry to sort of catch up to where the other activists are. And I think the thing that we all need to keep in mind, whether we are new or experienced, is that our activist movements tend to be prefigurative movements, which means that we're trying to live in a way now that reflects the future that we want to see. So we're trying to take on a lot of ways of behaving, treating each other, and living in the world for this future world, which is such a beautiful thing to try to do. But it is also kind of a weird thing. It's because it means that you've got a lot of people all trying to take on a new culture, really, that is not the same, or in many ways may not be the same as the culture that they were raised in. So most of us, if we're raised in the dominant culture, we might have a lot to learn in terms of this new future world, and that's often why we are attracted to these movements in the first place, right? Because our dominant culture has not been so great for us or the people around us. We want a world that hurts less, And, I want that for our movements as well. I want them to hurt less. And I think that's what this is about when people are taking on a lot of new skills and language and lifestyle things. But it does mean that you've got a lot of people who are kind of in a hurry to change their culture, and it can end up being a little bit performative, and like people are just taking on something that they haven't necessarily deeply integrated. So I guess what I'm saying, first of all, is to just slow down a little bit and let these things integrate in a deep way, rather than being in a hurry to try to act like you're the perfect activist, because there are no perfect activists. We're all just in the struggle. We're all just trying to live this future way of being. I kind of think of it a little bit like this. Like, I don't know if this entirely works as a metaphor, but I think it's a fun way to think about it, that it's like when you join these activist scenes, it's like you think you've arrived in this new country. Like, for example, I say, okay, so I'm in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so as an exotic place that we might go from here, it's like you think you've arrived in France, but actually you've arrived in a place with a lot of people who've read about France and have hung out with people who they think are from France and have sort of modeled their behavior on them, but they're actually not French. They are trying to be French. And it sounds like I'm being shady, but I'm not trying to just tear people down. I'm sort of taking the piss of myself here as well. And I mean this with real love for the people who are making these efforts. It's like we've got our authentic selves, all the shit that society has put on us, as we've grown up in our families, our school system, the work experiences we've had before we come to activism. And then we've got the ideals and ways of being we're trying to put on top of that, right? And it can be tricky to know at any given time which one of those you're coming from. And I think a big one where this, shows the most is around non-hierarchical ways of working and trying to work by consensus. That is difficult, and it's the sort of thing that you can, read in a book or talk to other people and immediately go, oh yes, that's a fabulous way of doing things. Of course it makes the most sense. Of course humanity has done that for millions of years in, tribal situations and stuff. We'll do that too. And I 100% believe in that as an effort to try to do. But most of us weren't raised in a situation that is the main way of doing things, right? Most of us. Some people definitely will be. And I'll be, interested to hear from people who that's been more of their experience. But for many of us, that isn't the way that we're used to doing things. And so it takes a lot of time to learn these things. And so some of the things as you go on with your activist journey, they can feel overwhelming at first, like taking on veganism, for example. But they do get easier over time. Like over time, you learn where to get some great fair trade, locally made canvas sneakers, You might get an excellent recipe for making your own oat milk and, be so used to making it by now that you don't even notice that that's something you have to do in your life. Those things get easier over time, but other things get harder. And one of those things is meaningfully sharing the power that you accumulate as you take on all these lifestyle things, as you take on all the different language and skills of the scene that you're in. And that's where we're all in the struggle, So I'm saying two things. I'm saying, first of all, be gentle with yourself. Don't be in a hurry to become the perfect activist. That's not a thing anyway. Don't feel, like you need to start performing and policing yourself and policing each other. That just leads to a lot of cynicism, really, Try to go slow and really deeply integrate these things. And, just take one or two at a time, or what feels good to take on at a time. and be humble with it, and don't be ashamed of saying, you know, I'm still working through this or that. The other thing that I'm saying is, because there are no perfect activists and we're all in the struggle, try not to have unrealistic expectations for the more experienced activists that you see around you. I'm not saying be really cynical and expect everyone to be jerks, but don't expect them to be perfect and live up to all of the ideals or all of the beautiful things that they espouse. You know, like sometimes some yucky things come out in people, and it's because, like I say, we've all got these things we're trying to aspire to and live, and we've also got all shadow sides of ourselves that we might not want to look at but come out, especially if we're feeling challenged or uncertain in our position in the group. And so I want to say, follow your gut. If you see somebody who's more experienced and you think that they are really onto it and are saying and doing all these wonderful things, but then you find some elements of their behavior creepy, trust yourself. You know, creepy behavior is creepy behavior. It doesn't matter who's doing it. So yeah, there are no perfect activists, and just let yourself be guided by your kind of inner experience of how people treat each other. And I hope that if we do these things, it'll lessen some of the overwhelm of trying to, you know, catch up and compete and be like everybody else. And it might also lessen some of the defensiveness, the competitiveness, the trying to bolster up and hold on to our image of ourselves as a perfect activist, which can come out in some ugly ways, you know. If somebody challenges you on your behavior, try not to, it happens to us all, but try not to hook in too much of this fear that, oh gosh, does this mean I'm not really an anarchist, or am I not really an am I not really a feminist, or, you know, whatever, because somebody said that I've done this thing. You know, just take a deep breath, know that you're enough, and know that we're all in the struggle and working on stuff, right? So yeah, those two things. Go slow, try to integrate it, and also don't have unrealistic expectations for the more experienced activists. Because I think these things, you know, the exhaustion of trying to compete with and, you know, prove yourself as an activist, coupled with the real disappointment that can happen when people who you have a lot of faith in and seem to be so much more onto it than you let you down, or hurt other people in the movement, that can lead to burnout. You know, that can really grind people down. So yeah, those two things are what I'm saying is my first real advice for activists coming in. I think with this thing of telling yourself that you're enough, depending on your family background, you know, the dynamic that you were raised in, and the particular culture of the movement that you're in, that thing of feeling like you're enough can be more difficult or easy, right? So for some people that might be quite easy to take on, and other people might have to do some quite hard work. And I think that's work that's worth doing. I've tried to start in this video with some of the deeper reasons that can make staying in the struggle and staying in the movements difficult, rather than just starting with well-being in terms of, here's a whole lot of other lifestyle things you should take on, you know, like make sure you get enough sleep, don't eat at your desk, you know, consider learning mindfulness, all those sort of things. Those are all great things, but they can also feel like a whole other lot of shoulds on top of all the shoulds that you've got, right? You should be doing this, you should be doing that. More work. So I feel a little bit mean telling you to do the work of trying to feel like you're enough But also it's gentle work. Like take it on as a kindness, a lovingness to yourself, right? And it's work that's worth doing, I think, to make our activist movement sustainable. So here's just a few ideas that I had for how you might help yourself to feel more enough. Everyone's going to follow a different path and find different things useful. So think about what I'm saying, but there might be whole other ways that you find it helpful. And again, love to hear in the comments if people have got ideas to share. So meditation may help some people, and yoga, both of them have a big emphasis on just being and breathing and being enough. Therapy will help some people. It's definitely helped me. You might find a more sort of very rational approach works for you. So you might want to collect evidence that you are enough, make a rational argument for why you are enough, write that down somewhere, and have it to refer back to when you're not feeling that way. You could do sort of some more just reminder type things, like you could have it written on your wall or in the back of your diary. You might put that association into a piece of jewellery or clothing that you're going to wear regularly in activist spaces, and as just a little reminder or a keepsake from a loved one or something like that to remind you that you're enough. Recently I've had a lot of success with having a particular candle that I've dedicated. It sounds kind of corny. I'm not ashamed to say it. But I've got this self-love candle, and I've poured a lot of love into it. I've put some herbs on there that I love, like lavender and rose and calendula, just things that have really beautiful associations to me. And whenever I'm feeling crappy and down on myself and just yucky, I light this candle, and it just somehow softens that. It wraps me in some gentleness. And I think that's what we all need sometimes, is a bit of gentleness. So yeah, that's been working really nicely for me lately. Gosh, there's probably so many other different things you could try, but those are some ideas that I had. The other thing that I thought could be really, really useful, and it is connected to this whole thing of being enough, is when you're coming in as a new activist, to spend some time to sit down and write out what your core values are. So what are the things that are meaningful to you, that have attracted you to this particular movement, this activism? What is the change you want to see in the world? Like what is really driving you? And I think as much as you can, try to write that in just simple language, not necessarily the language that you're trying to take on as part of the movement. In fact, it's better if it's not that language, I think. I think if it's just very plain language. And so about the movement, but also about how you think it's important for people to treat each other. So what your core values are in terms of how people behave. And these things might change over time, but it's really good to know where you are coming from now. It'll help you communicate better within the movement and also with people outside the movement that you might be wanting to advocate to or explain why you're involved in the movement. And I think that having a really clear sense of that can also help us to feel that we are enough and that we belong as part of this movement. Yeah, so those are my initial thoughts. Like I say, I've got a whole lot of other things that I want to talk about, so please join me for the coming weeks to hear my other advice for new activists. Again, I would love to hear other people's thoughts on all of this. I just really want us to be able to keep doing the work and stay in the struggle, and protect our hearts at the same time. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Please join me again and have a lovely day. Noho ora mai.